I was using the opportunity to spend some time as Pam. I may be a tomboy, but I like putting on a gown, makeup, and hair, just like any other girl. And I had to be really, really, really careful about that. By the way, you had to call the gay men's bars ahead and ask them, do you accept transgender people? Because if they didn't, you didn't go there. I did try to go in New York a couple of times, but it was dangerous. I'm just going to leave it at that.
People got fired.
Well, especially in my business, and if you got caught and fired, you're blacklisted. You weren't ever working in media again.
What do you really know about people who were born transgender? Have you ever met someone who's transgender? Well, if you're like me, you're curious but hesitant to ask questions. Well, welcome to Demystifying the Transgender Journey. In our conversations with people who were born transgender, their families, friends, and the professionals who support them, we ask probing questions and discover insightful and educational answers. You can also find more information on our website, thetransgenderjourney.com. Now let's get right into today's episode. Well, welcome everybody. Thank you for joining us for another episode of Demystifying the Transgender Journey. We're glad you're here today. This is the place where real stories, honest conversation, and authentic voices come to life from people born transgender, their family members, friends, coworkers, healthcare professionals who walk alongside them. So I'm one of your hosts, Lynn Murphy. I'm an author, speaker, leadership coach, and founder of Women Who Push the Limits. And I am the cisgender half of our team. So joining me is your amazing co-host, Wendy Cole, who is a transition mentor, very insightful coach, and she's living proof that it's never too late to embrace your true self. She transitioned at age 67 and now helps others navigate life's biggest challenges and biggest changes, which, transitioning is pretty big change. So together we're bringing you conversations that open minds, touch hearts, inspire change. So we're sharing stories with those who are ready to learn more about the transgender experience. And in today's episode, we're really looking forward to a stimulating conversation about what it takes to change hearts, laws, and history, all while staying true to yourself. So our guest today is Pam Daniels, and she has done exactly that. She's a pioneering journalist, engineer, and activist. Her broadcast career stretched across 4 decades in some of the nation's biggest newsrooms, from Boston to New York, and even here in Arizona. I wouldn't call that one of the biggest newsrooms, but that's where I'm from. So she's covered everything from presidential elections to immigration reform to Tiananmen Square protests. And in New Jersey, she shaped how the state got its news as the founding news director of its largest radio station, 101.5. But her creativity didn't stop there. She's created and syndicated the radio show Rock Time Warp, which is now reborn on her YouTube channel called Pam Daniels Presents. Pam is also a trailblazer in politics. As a transgender woman and longtime Republican, yes, we're interviewing a Republican, she has built bridges across party lines to advance the LGBTQ plus rights, and her advocacy was instrumental in passing the Babs-Cipperstein law, which ensures transgender people in New York can update their birth certificate to reflect their true identity. Pam is someone who has never been afraid to break new ground in journalism, in politics, and in her own life. And we're delighted to welcome her to the show today. Pam, thank you for joining us.
Well, thank you. And by the way, that was New Jersey's law, not New York. Babs-Cipperstein's law. That was New Jersey.
Thank
But
you.
Babs was my first cool big sister. I've got another one now, and that's wonderful. But that said,
Yeah, you have something to share with us that we wanted to start this podcast with.
yes, and if you don't mind, I'm going to do this right now because this needs repetition a lot. And by the way, I'm not a Republican anymore. I was a DEI real Republican when that existed. I'm a proud blue Democrat. My dear friend of 36 years, who I served on her senior staff, the first female governor of New Jersey, Christy Whitman, she's an independent now and supporting the Democrat here in New Jersey for governor. Anyways, we, the people of the United States, in order to form a more perfect union, establish justice, ensure domestic tranquility, provide for the common defense, promote the general welfare, and secure the blessings of liberty to ourselves and our posterity, do ordain and establish this Constitution for the United States of America. This needs to be read aloud on every street corner, at the end of every broadcast imaginable, so people realize what's going on right now. This is take two of the Jim Crow era after Ulysses Grant's second administration. States' rights, basically to chase and kill people of color. That's what they did.
Mm-hmm.
They're pulling the same stunt.
Yeah, it's a different target this time. Well, there's still some of that other target too, but there's a different target this time.
Well, they're starting with us, but they're going to go through
Yeah.
all of us in the LGBTQI.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Inevitable.
Yeah. So that's very important. Thanks for reading that, Pam. I think you got a great point there that we need to remember that and need to be paying attention. And that's one of the reasons we're doing this podcast, not just about the Constitution, but about educating people about what's going on in the transgender community and what's happening in politics that's so, so dangerous and cruel. That's the word I keep using, is cruel. It's ridiculous.
And equating it to the Jim Crow era is very appropriate because they started with people who were brown. That's all in Project 2025, which they lied about. And the next on the target is us.
Yep.
Well, and they're starting with homeless people too.
Oh, they're attacking everybody. I'm a senior, and I depend on my Medicare, some Medicaid, and
Social Security.
thank goodness I live in New Jersey, where we hopefully are going to have a governor who has a plan for making sure at least seniors in our state aren't terribly affected.
Yeah, it's dangerous. But let's talk about you for a few minutes, Pam. We want to hear your story. So you've had an amazing career, broadcast, journalism. Let's go back to your childhood, what it was like growing up. You transitioned in your 50s, is that right?
Yeah, 54 years old.
54 years old, okay. So people will say to us, or I read this stupid stuff on social media, that children can't possibly know, that they're just too young to know anything about gender or anything like that. Tell us your experience, because I think you said you knew when you were young.
Well, I knew when I was 5 and 6 years old that I was really a girl, and I'm not going to go into detail as to why, but I was discovered doing something that was not male. And suddenly my mom was the den mother and dad was the Cub Pack committee person. And I loved scouting. I'm an Eagle Scout. I was an adult leader in Nogales, Santa Cruz County. The real epiphany for me came in October of 1969. That was my beginning of my freshman year in high school. And below the fold on my home newspaper was a story with a word in it that I'd never seen, heard, or anything before. The word was transsexual. I was like, what? Yeah, Wendy, because we've discussed this.
Absolutely. That was my first epiphany of Christine Jorgensen.
Yes.
The 1950s.
I knew it was possible. Okay. And that's what got me through until I was 54 and having suicidal nightmares almost every night. But the day I came out to my best friend, who was then still my wife, that stopped because I had finally told somebody the truth. And she didn't ditch me. Okay. She stuck with me. From that moment forward, in October of 1969, I knew it was possible. And just knowing that was enough. I was still doing things very quietly on the side, which I'm not going to go into any detail on. To me, it's, not important.
Well, as a child, with your parents, did you try to hide that? How did you deal
Oh,
with
yeah. No, I made a pledge to myself. I was never going to get caught again. That's simple. And I didn't.
Okay.
And in fact, most people who knew me, well, I consider myself a transgender woman, yes, but I'm a tomboy. I loved sports. I was good at golf. I was a hockey player. The knees are shot, so that's gone. I was an expert skier.
They're
Also,
shot, so that's gone.
yes, thank you. And I never thought of it any other way. I loved camping. I loved the outdoors, and I was good at it. And I have a granddaughter now, and she can become an Eagle Scout like me.
So
But
you weren't doing things that upset your parents or that your,
no, they probably figured whatever they did worked. Okay.
Right.
whatever they did to disabuse you of the notion that you were a girl.
Hmm.
I'm sure that was the same thing with me because after they threatened me at 10 with being committed to a psych facility, I did exactly what you did. I'm never going to get caught doing that again.
Hmm. And by the way, Wendy, I don't know if I could have withstood the torture that you were forced to endure. And they're
It's funny.
trying to make that happen again.
Yep.
Yes, they're passing laws now and healthcare, the healthcare law now that's, well, we'll get into that later, but so I think you told us that your parents were uber Roman Catholic. Did that-
Yes. And I joke now, I'm a lifelong atheist and recovering Roman Catholic. And my youngest son-in-law, who does a little stand-up on the side, said, "Can I use that?" I said, "Sure."
So, so how did you tamp this down when you were a child and when you were older? You know, you discovered.
I found out very, very cautious ways of being myself every now and again and never get caught. That's
Okay.
simple. 2008, transitioning was possible medically. I noticed the only people who could were independently wealthy. You couldn't change any of your documents, driver's license, passports, birth certificates, nothing. So
Absolutely.
in the surgery, there's no insurance covering anything. Uh, So I had to make a plan somehow to get wealthy enough and not greedy, it's just so that I could afford to transition. And my last venture was that Rock Time Warp that you mentioned. I had lined up $3 million in investment capital to grow my station roster. And by the way, my anchor station was KDKB FM there in Phoenix.
Yes, I know them.
Yeah, I don't know if they're rock anymore, but they were really great progressive rock back then. But
Yeah.
the global financial meltdown in 2008 pulled that rug out from under me permanently. That's when the suicidal thoughts started, and only at night I was crying in my pillow. So I finally I came out to my best friend, and the dream stopped.
See, back then, too, the only way that we could possibly do this is live underground in New York City or San Francisco. And
Yep.
you could not be part of society at
Yep.
all.
No, because everybody was going to know.
Well, let's talk about your career because you were in broadcast journalism before you transitioned. You had quite a career and knew a lot of famous people. And
Yeah, yeah, and kibitzed with quite a few of them too. In case you hadn't noticed, that's part of my nature. Anyways, working at 66 WNBC radio news in New York, and I was
30
also
Rock.
yes, 30 Rockefeller. Oh gosh, just getting on the elevator, I'd go into the second floor and network.
Christmas tree.
Hmm. Oh, and when I started there, I was working weekends. I still had a local job here in Ocean County's local radio station news. On the weekends, we could sit in Studio 8H, which is still home to Saturday Night Live. And that's when they would do the dress rehearsals and stuff and test out what laugh lines actually worked. So I would get in to do morning, Saturday and Sunday mornings. My first newscast would have been like 5:30 and then 6. And I finished up by 11 or 11:30. And somebody else picked it up for the rest of the afternoon. And man, I'd beeline up to 8H and just sit there and wait for it to start. But anyways, yeah, when NBC radio got sold off, jerks, sorry. Bunch of bean counters at the headquarters decided that we weren't making enough money, 50 million a year, whatever. Um, The next move, a friend of mine who's actually a writer and producer also at NBC Radio and did some TV at Channel 4, um, he ended up news director at Channel 9, WWOR TV, Channel 9. And that's how I ended up covering Tiananmen Square, because that happened when I was a writer and producer there. I did very little on-camera work. They would go to the producers and stick a camera in. So, what are you working on for tonight's newscast? And, you do a little blurb, but I love being there. And then a friend of mine also, who was ex-NBC Radio, called me up and said, well, we just bought this 50,000 watt FM station in Trenton, and I'd like you to come on board as their news director. So that's how I ended up as New Jersey 101.5's founding news director.
Is that how you got interested in politics?
Well, I was always interested in politics. I mean, when I was in BC Radio, I was down in Washington on assignments several times. Bill Bradley's 1986 income tax reform bill, and he also was heavily involved in immigration reform back then. Oh gosh, members of Congress. Well, dear friend who passed away 3 years ago. Jim Colby was the second openly gay Republican member of Congress from Tucson. And I met him in 1984 when I was still GM of the radio station in Nogales. He's the one, by the way, we'll cover this a little bit later when we talk about getting the first ever transgender inclusive non-discrimination act passed in the United States Senate. But he used to do whip counting for me on the sides to let me know who's available and who's not and so on and so forth. But yeah, I gradually drifted more towards the politics as the news director at 101.5. By the way, I met my wife and best friend in September, so it's 36 years this month. And a month and a half later, I met Christy because she decided to run against Bill Bradley. She came within a percentage point and a half of actually pulling it off. But
So this is New Jersey Governor Christie.
yes, yeah. And there was a silent quid pro quo, if you will, that she was establishing the base because what she really wanted was to become governor. And she's the first female governor of New Jersey. And I got to serve as her director of radio and television on her senior staff every time she was on the air, including the 1995 Republican response to Bill Clinton's State of the Union speech. And for the first time in history, we did it before a packed live audience in the State Assembly chamber. The full speech is still up on C-SPAN. And in fact, I had her on my public affairs show a while ago. She's going to come back again too, but
This is Christy Whitman.
yes, yeah.
Well, were you interested in LGBTQ advocacy at that time?
I was aware of it, but still, it was so, again, I mean, okay, when I had the software business, I had clients all over the country. And yes, I had the opportunities. By the way, you had to call the gay men's bars ahead and ask them, do you accept transgender people? And because if they didn't, you didn't go there. I'm serious.
But you weren't out yet at that point.
No, I was, using the opportunity to spend some time as Pam. And I had to be really, really, really careful about that. And I was.
Especially back then, trans was not welcome in gay bars.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
In all places, yeah.
There was a woman in Maryland of that age group in her 70s back then that used to refer to us as pretend beings.
Okay, so you were presenting as female.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I may be a tomboy, but I like putting on a gown, makeup, and hair, just like any other girl.
And when did you discover that you liked that?
Oh, gosh. Probably mostly with the software business. I did try to go in New York a couple of times, but it was dangerous. I'm just going to leave it at that. And I wasn't into
People got fired.
well, especially in my business. And if you got caught and fired, you're blacklisted. You weren't ever working in media again.
So
So
you didn't want to cross that line.
no, no. And somebody actually did, and he was an NBCer, and I'm not going to mention the name, but that was my wake-up call. I was, whoops. Even elsewhere around the country, I was extremely cautious.
So you were experimenting, you were presenting as female in certain environments. So
Yeah.
it wasn't that you had completely denied that you're
Oh
transgender.
no, yeah, no. From that newspaper article in 1969 forward, that never left my mind
Okay.
every day of, yeah.
You just didn't know that you could do something medically until
Well, Wendy reminded me of something. I began my real life test in September of 2011 and started hormones at the end of that in 2012. Wendy reminded me, yeah, that's that when the gender dysphoria diagnosis came out, which, by the way, HIPAA, the Health Information Portability and Accountability Act, covers us. Nobody has any right except a medical professional that's licensed gets to know. No one else.
Right.
And when it comes to children in school, one person in the school, the medically licensed individual, nurse or whatever, that's it.
Mhm.
Nobody gets to know.
yeah.
Right. And so they were trying at one point, I don't know where it stands now, to get major hospitals around the country to release records of transgender patients to
Oh
them,
yeah.
to the
I,
government.
I think that
Frightening.
was part of Doge too.
Yes.
Yeah, that's frightening. So you transitioned slowly then until you got to the point where you could transition medically. Is that right?
Yeah, I mean, after I came out, I would go out where I could, when I could, which wasn't very often.
What support did you have through all of this, other than your wife?
No one but my wife.
And that was
Okay.
after you came out to her.
Yes. Yeah.
Before that, no support.
Nothing, nothing. I had no friends, no, you know, and I didn't really start going to the Raven until 2012 because of that as well. And Wendy and I have a history at the Raven in New Hope, Pennsylvania.
Well, and you said you came out to Governor Christie though earlier.
Yeah, that was right after I came out to Maureen. So
Okay.
yeah, because as a senior staffer, I was afraid that something might get back to her as a news item, and I wanted her to be able to say, "Yeah, I know," and that's the way she'd do it too.
But
She's a dear friend. I know her.
you were still presenting as male at that point.
At that point, yes,
Okay.
yeah,
And so how did she respond to that?
she was supportive. In fact, um, there was a Republican congressman the following year that was doing a fundraiser way up north. I think it was Wyckoff. This is my area where I grew up. And she was going to be a main speaker to help raise money for this congressional campaign. So I reached out to her and I said, "Hey, I'd like to see you. I'm going to come up and attend." She said, "Yeah, come on up." And we hung out for a little bit. She was busy, you know, with everybody else. But yeah, she went out of her way to back everything Babs and I were doing. Okay, and that's the other thing I got to tell you about Babs. She
Yeah.
was a riot.
That law you helped get passed.
Well, a friend of mine, this lady who knew me from that, also knew Babs quite well. And so she says, "I got a Republican who's transgender." And Babs went nuts. I got a phone call that day. And I drove up and met her. In fact, Halloween of 2009, she had a Halloween party there at her house. And I went and attended. And that was a lot of fun. That was probably my first time out with a whole bunch of activists. And I was in heaven, frankly. Um, and
And so they
then,
all thought it was a costume?
well, no,
No
not mine.
costume? No,
No.
they knew.
Yeah. Although I did, you just brought back another memory. After I came out, I talked to my wife then, and said, "Hey, let's do something." There was a great rock club down on Long Beach Island. They had a Halloween party, and they also got the best cover bands back in those days. And I said, why don't we go together? You be Michael Jackson, and I'll be Brooke Shields. And we did. And back then, there were still humans collecting the toll, and so I handed the toll taker, a guy, a five. And I said, "Can you give me some quarters for the road back?" And he heard my voice, and then he laughed and said, "Oh yeah, it's Halloween." And my wife, she practically went through the windshield laughing at that one. So
You were an example of how Republicans could be transgender.
well, I think for a long time I was the only one. I'm not sure, but well, I changed my registration a long
No,
time ago
I know.
because of and it broke my heart too because, well,
Back then, that must have been really shocking to some people.
yeah, and well, Babs and I in 2013 for the first time in American history, and the late Jim Colby was instrumental in this too, helped me line up. We had as prime Republican co-sponsors, Susan Collins of Maine and Mark Kirk of Illinois, who had taken Obama's seat in the Senate. Lisa Murkowski was on the fence, so I asked the governor to reach out, Christie to reach out to Susan Collins, and they got me a meeting with her chief counsel. And the next day she flipped to, "Yeah, I'm on board." And Jim Colby reached out to his Navy counterpart, who was a senator at that point, but had been in the House of Representatives, John McCain.
Mhm.
Well, McCain came on board, but so did his junior senator, Jeff Flake, a Mormon.
Yeah, I remember him.
Yep. And then Orrin Hatch of Utah.
What?
Well, I'm in too. And the surprise was Dean Heller, senator from Nevada. So now I had this block, this Western block, and we already had Mark Kirk in Illinois. I knew Rob Portman would come on board. He did. I knew Kelly Ayotte would come on board from New Hampshire. But surprise, Pat Toomey, arch Roman
Pennsylvania.
Catholic anti-choice,
Wow.
he came on board because, well, like the Caseys, father and
Hmm.
son, same thing, Roman Catholic anti-abortion, but they were solid for
Yeah,
LGBTQ rights.
Wow.
Casey was very solid on that. And I actually talked with his staff both in Pennsylvania and in DC on numerous occasions about transgender issues.
And we had the votes in the House too, okay? But this is the funny part of it. Well, not so funny. I reached out to then Colorado Congressman, who's now the governor of Colorado now, Jared Polis, and asked if he or somebody would do or is doing a discharge petition at the first Monday of every month. If you get a majority of votes, you can force a bill, whether it's been in committee or not, you can force a bill to the floor for a vote. And he got as far as 175. He couldn't even get all of the Democrats because they had cover and they were going to be running the following year. And so they wouldn't sign. So he got to like 175. But yeah,
Quite an accomplishment, though.
yeah. Well, look, we got the ball rolling, and so now, well, I don't want to make too much news here because there's things, there are wheels in motion that we're going to know a lot more about in the next 3 to 6 weeks. But be that as it may,
And things will unfold next year.
yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly. Thank you.
Well, and you
Uh,
were the first, what did I have? The first transgender woman to serve on the New Jersey Federation of Republican Women Board of Governors, first in all
Yes.
50 states, right?
Yes. Christie's grandmother helped found that more than 100 years ago. And both her grandmother and mom were presidents of that. The killer, too, was like 8 or 9 months after I was elected to the board. And there were no votes, okay? The national board tried to force our board to force me out. And every one of those women stood shoulder to shoulder and said no.
Wonderful.
Most
Wow.
of them aren't there anymore.
Well, I think the Republican Party has changed a bit, though, since then, hasn't it?
Yes, yes,
tad.
thank you.
Just a tad.
Well, like I was talking with you recently, this is Jim Crow all over again.
Yep.
They're using states' rights, okay, to make bogus, unconstitutional law, and they're coming after us, the weakest. But hey, if they get away with it with us, everybody else, look out.
Well, they're using states' rights two different ways. It's hypocritical. You know, if they want to kick something down the road, they say, oh, it's states' rights, it's states' rights. But then if they don't, then it's, you know, let's handle it.
That's
on the
why I
federal
keep
level.
coming back to HIPAA, because under the Health Information Portability and Accountability Act, we have, as diagnosed people with a diagnosed condition, we have a right to absolute privacy.
Mhm.
But we have a Supreme Court that will stick with the creeps,
Yeah,
basically.
doesn't matter what the laws are. And, you know, it's all going to be litigated. So the
Mhm.
attorneys are going to be making money. But when it gets to the Supreme Court, we kind of know
Game
where that's.
over.
Well, there's two wild cards there. The Chief Justice and what Brett Kavanaugh served on Anthony Kennedy's staff, okay, clerked for him. And I've seen indications that under the right circumstances, if things go a little too far, I think they'll join the three liberals. I'm hoping, okay, because,
That would be amazing if that happens.
well, I think there are a few cases that are either on the docket or they're in the various appellate courts that could percolate early to mid next year. We'll see. But these are interesting times.
Interesting times. Well, one thing that we hear so much and then there are phony studies about is regrets, and then how transgender people regret transitions. What's your experience on that?
I never regretted anything. You know what? I'm a positive person to begin with, so I'm always thinking forward, not backward, except when you need to know some history. But yeah, I'm 70 years and almost 6 months old now, and anything I can do to wake up the 30 and 40 somethings, because they're the people that are going to have to get the work done. Yeah, Wendy and I, well,
We'll be long gone.
Yeah.
if nothing else, we can help show them the way. And
Oh, we're going to kick ass and take names.
I love it. Good girl.
So when you think about your life, how's life as a woman different from what you expected?
Oh, wonderful. Are you kidding me? No, this is,
Or is it what you expected?
oh, more. Okay. It's way more. I mean, I could never have predicted that I would have a best friend and former wife of 36 years and a dear, I'm going to say Christy's a best friend too. In fact, it was funny when I was on her staff and I'd get home from Trenton. My wife would say, "So how was the other woman today?" And I thought, she's fine. And I told Christy that. And so she starts every once in a while, tell your wife the other woman's doing fine. Say hello for me. Okay. But that's the kind of person she is. But she's also dead serious. And if she's coming after you politically, you better hunker down because she knows what she's doing. And I love our candidate too, because she's cut from the same cloth. Oh, and Commonwealth of Virginia, that's the only other gubernatorial race. Any of you people in the Commonwealth of Virginia watching this, you got to get active and do it now.
So, you know, some people talk about why would someone give up their man card to be a woman in these days when it's hard to be a woman? How do
Yeah,
you
you know what? I never thought
card?
of that.
Never
I'm
thought.
honest. It never crossed my mind because there was a fight to be had, and my sleeves were rolled up. I wanted to fight.
I've been asked, how can you give up your male privilege? Well, I never thought of it as a privilege.
Did you think of it as a responsibility?
Probably, yeah. I mean, I'm not an Eagle Scout for nothing. Okay. I take that very seriously. I was never upset or feeling rejected because I was too busy trying to figure out how to fight. I don't know how to say it any other way.
So what surprises you about your life?
That we got this far, frankly. No, I mean that.
We as the community, you're saying.
Yes. And then Wendy and I have had some discussions about this too, because, well, the dark times were really dark. You know, one of the darkest times is that creep in the late 80s and early 90s, Jerry Springer.
Mhm.
Those TV shows did more damage to our community than anything else.
Yep.
The media's portrayed people who were born transgender as weirdos or sex workers. You know, we haven't seen positive examples, positive
Yeah.
representations of people who are born transgender really until, I mean, somewhat lately, but historically not.
Well, they're going to get to know me.
See, the other thing too that happens is when somebody like Sarah McBride gets elected to Congress, there are people in our community that consider her a sellout. Now, here's a woman who is in the game trying to make a difference. And people in our community, they're a minority, but there are people in our community that say, oh, she's a sellout. She just copped out. In order to make a difference in our culture, and that's the problem, is our culture,
Right.
which influences government, religion, and everything we do.
And the creeps in the speaker's office and
Oh,
their
God.
leadership, they're
they're-
trying to prevent her from using the ladies' rooms over on
I
the
know.
house side.
I promise you that when I go to the Capitol, I am using the woman's room, and they can go.
Good girl. I'll tell you what, let me know when you go and I'll go with you.
Okay.
You just remind me of another Babs story. Late 2012, coming up on 2013, we were working our butts off for the inclusive end of, and we were over on the House side and doing all the Democrats. And there weren't many Republicans yet to talk to at that point. But anyways, Babs, we're out in the hallway and she goes, you have to go to the bathroom? I said, not right now. She said, yeah, we probably ought to go here. You know, we have more friends over here. And that I never thought about that. But then we got over to the Senate side and she and I are talking, okay, back and forth. And these two guys with cowboy hats are in front of us on the elevator with Southern accents, okay?
Mhm.
And they started not ridiculing directly, but they were upset they were on an elevator with the two of us.
They were.
Were they afraid it was going to rub off?
Yeah, yeah, it's a disease, right? I
We're
forgot.
contagious.
Yeah. Get me the vaccine. I don't know. Yeah, we
And
will get through this. We got through Jim Crow. It took until the Civil Rights Act of 1964, which, by the way, it was Republicans, DEI, real Republicans who supplied the vote, and Democrat President Lyndon Baines Johnson signing it. And he took a huge risk.
Yeah.
Then the next year, he signs the Voting Rights Act.
Mhm.
They're trying to tear both of them down right now.
Yeah, they're trying to take us back to the good old days, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, with all this stuff going on, how do you stay grounded?
That's funny. You know what popped into my head? And I actually met him a long time ago because my station out west, we carried American Top 40. Casey Kasem,
Oh, yeah.
keep your feet on the ground, but keep reaching for the stars or something like that. I'm an optimist by nature. In fact, my father used to call me the cockeyed optimist.
So what's your message to other adults who, they know that they're transgender, they're trying to decide what to do. What's your message to them?
Get help now while you can. Yeah, because it's probably not going to be readily available in all 50 states very soon, A. And B, if you don't live anywhere near a state that can offer medical care,
Move.
yeah, You better.
Mm.
You better.
What unexpected lessons have you found in your life?
Whew. Well, the return of my former party to uh, ridiculous, despicable policies. And actually, Nixon started that with his Southern strategy in 1968. Okay, and that began the pollution of the party I grew up with and came of age
Absolutely.
in. And by the end of the 80s, beginning of the 90s, that bad work was done and the stage set for what we've got now. Um,
Mhm.
It's
but
becoming,
We didn't get here by accident.
no.
This was planned.
Mhm.
And the Federalist Society has been working
Be-
behind the scenes for decades, and they're evil.
Yes, they are. And by the way, there was a Federalist movement back when Jim Crow and states' rights. It's the same thing. They're
Right.
repeating history we've already lived through. The difference, though, now is we have mass communications at our disposal,
Hmm.
which is why, Lynn, Wendy, the work you're doing with this program is crucial. And I apologize to people watching for not doing the more personal stuff that other people on this program do. And it's not because I'm uncomfortable with talking about it. It's there's so much stuff that we've got to get together on now before it is too late.
Mhm.
Absolutely.
And
Absolutely.
we appreciate you bringing that out, because your experience is different from everybody else's, and love that you've been in politics and in, broadcast, in the media. It's so important that we understand what we need to do. And I think the mindset's important too. What do you do to reinforce your mindset and to change the minds of other people?
As soon as I hear something negative, I focus on the solution. What do we have to do next? How do we get it done? And by the way, all of you out there listening to me, you can do this too by getting in touch with your local, and there are excellent LGBTQ rights groups in most of the states, and there are some really great national ones. Just get involved. Just get involved and stay involved. And by the way, show up on Pride Day.
Yeah, do something, be active. You've got to take action. We sit around and talk about stuff, but
Mhm.
unless we take action, nothing's going to happen.
Yep.
What do you want people, I was going to say, to understand? People may not understand all this, but what do you want people to know about people who are born transgender in the transgender journey?
Just that. This is something that naturally happens. And I've heard in other of your podcasts, Wendy describe it excellently, how the brain develops. In fact, I never knew that until I heard Wendy talk about it. And I think it was with Tamara. Wendy describing the development of the brain and the second trimester something.
Right.
I had never heard that before, and that's what this program does best.
And
Yep.
we got another interview coming up with someone who's studied that. Wendy, what did she have a PhD in?
PhD in psychology, PhD in sociology, and she's been studying what it means to be born transgender since 1990. And we're doing multiple interviews with her to get all of her scientific and medical research out. She's been behind the scenes all these years. She has said that she likes what we're doing too because we're out being social. And as I told you the other day, I'm not a politician. I'm a radical. And
Good.
I'm going to work with you.
I remember those radical days in Vietnam.
SDS.
Yes, you and I are birds of a feather there.
Mm-hmm.
Something to take action. Well, so let's talk about your book.
Oh, and
You've
thank
got
you.
an excellent book here that you've
Yes,
written.
I self-publish on Amazon, and 20% of my royalties get split 5 ways between four national and my Garden State Equality here in New Jersey. Then the remaining 80% of my royalties I share with Bob LeBlanc and his husband.
So this is called Silent Drums, Adapt, Improvise, Overcome. the never before told true story of the decorated gay Vietnam War combat Marine who is the likely Rosa Parks of the LGBTQ civil rights movement. This is just fascinating book. So don't tell us the whole story, but give us
He was gay in 1964 when he joined the Marines, okay? And he gave somebody advice on how to get out while they were still in boot camp. He basically said, well, you just tell them you're homosexual, they'll kick you out, which they ended up doing to this particular individual. But then they investigated him.
Oh,
I will divulge this, but there's way more after this. When they asked him under oath if he was homosexual, he said, you have no right to ask. And then one of the inquisitors said, you're going to Vietnam, they'll kill you anyway.
woo.
Yeah.
That was the attitude.
Yeah. Yeah. But then Anthony Kennedy, DEI, real Republican, first time in American history, issues a restraining order and then forces the Marines to give Bob an honorable discharge. And 39 years later, almost to the day, Anthony Kennedy is the deciding vote for marriage equality. And that's, by the way, that's on the chopping block right now with so-called states' rights.
Yeah. So how did you get the information for this book?
Bob found me on Facebook. And first thing I did, I checked his page out and I told him, hey, Bob, you really want to take your home phone number there off your Facebook page. And he did. But yeah, and then he sent me a couple of big boxes of all of his paperwork with all of this information. And it took me 3.5 years to research, and I confirmed everything. I'm an old hard-nosed reporter. I don't report something unless it's confirmed true. After 3.5 years, then I was ready to write. And it took me another 3.5 years before I was ready to publish. And I'm doing a book now with Bab's daughter's help. In fact, you can see right over my shoulder there the
Oh, yeah.
cover. And I'm doing another one, okay, that isn't up on my wall yet. Too Many Elephants Forgot, willingly, but I never forget. And I did a cartoon on the cover. And if you go to progresswithpam.com, you can see the cover. But that's going to be fun because everything I've discussed here and then some, that's proven history that they're trying to repeat.
Well, and that's what I'm taking away from the book. I haven't finished it, but that's what I'm taking away from it is in the Vietnam era, it was gays. And so now here we are in 2025 and the target is transgender.
Well, the demonstrations that happened because of Bob's final run-in with the Marine Corps, huge demonstrations broke out in Southern California. That was the roots of the Don't Ask, Don't Tell movement. He really was the Rosa Parks of our civil rights movement in that respect. He has terminal cancer, but he's been getting chemo every other week for the last, 20 years. And he's still hanging in there. He's a tough old codger. Well, he's a Marine. Hell, you don't get that distinction by being namby-pamby. I'm sorry. And that's another thing too, is the absolute despicable disparaging of people like him and me and Wendy. I mean,
well, people talk about how transgender women are not fit, well, any transgender, but are not fit to be in the military. They're not strong enough. But then you get people talking about sports and going, oh my God, they're too strong because they're biological.
This is crazy, all right?
Conveniently hypocritical.
Yes, but well, the medicine. Please, you should tell this because I'll screw it up. Wendy.
Now, even a year or two on estrogen, your muscles begin to change dramatically. Physical strength just changes. Your body fat moves around. Everything starts to shift. It takes years, but anyone who's been on estrogen for at least 3 or 4 years no longer has any of their male strength.
And parents who get their child diagnosed and helped early, they are counseled, but then only when puberty is approaching do they discuss the need or not need for medication.
and hormone blockers.
Yes. And oh, by the
That's
way, they're completely reversible.
right.
Well,
And
and they,
hormone blockers, estrogen therapy, vaginoplasty, the surgery, none of that was invented for transgender people. It
Yeah.
was all for cisgender women,
Yes.
cisgender people.
it's still okay for cisgender people to access that kind of medical care, especially cisgender teenagers, early onset puberty. They use
Yeah,
that all the time.
exactly.
Well, the notion that somehow boys are going to be bigger and stronger up against girls in high school sports, because that's what they're targeting, okay, is BS, period.
Right.
There is no medical evidence to that at all.
Yeah. No, it doesn't matter. Medical evidence? We don't need no stinking medical evidence. I mean, come
Yeah.
on.
Yes.
We
Don't get me started.
won't do that. So, Pam, what else do you want to tell us about? Anything else about your book or how people can contact you?
Yeah, you can do that right on my website, progresswithpam.com. By the way, I got a bio up there, some of my old blogs. A friend of mine served 29 years and left the Army as a sergeant major. She was in her first year of hormone therapy for the last year in combat in Afghanistan. And the medical doctor in her group, and she was the sergeant major under the commanding colonel, got together a bunch of women and they went to the PX, got her some sports bras to wear underneath her body armor because it hurts. Hello. And keep her prescription going so that when she got home, because she was retiring after that anyway, and she was decorated too. Okay. I mean, it's sick.
It's
Yes.
safe. And the high level people in the Pentagon who are transgender are gone. Women are gone. Women of color are gone.
Everything that involves equal employment opportunity or all of that, if people don't get with our group and help us right now to beat this into the dust, everybody's next.
Yeah.
Yeah. And cisgender women better watch out
Oh
because
yeah.
they're the target too.
Oh, they want to
Uh,
use Dobbs to get rid of choice. Period.
Exactly. And under the new regime, women are domestics. They're to stay home, take care of the family, and procreate and raise the man's children. That's the thinking of the Republican Party.
Yeah.
Well,
And
and with some of these laws now, if you don't look like Barbie and you go into a women's restroom and you're cisgender, tough. I don't know what you got to prove that you're a woman. I mean,
yeah, really.
cisgender women are getting accosted by security in
Right.
restrooms.
Well, one of the ways they will try to enforce that is by making sure we can't legally change our names or gender markers anywhere in the United States. That's coming. I've heard the discussions about that privately. And if they
Ooh.
pull half of the stuff that they're pulling on us right now, that's next. Period.
That's why your advice is urgency. Do what you can now.
Yes,
That's
get
What
involved.
what our community does not fully appreciate, and a lot of the young people don't even know. 2012 was the magic year where everything for us changed to being publicly possible.
I didn't know that until you told me.
I know most people don't, but that was the magic year when all this started. And under Obama,
Yeah.
again, the hated one, under Obama, he made Medicare cover transgender health, which triggered all the insurance companies to do the same.
Yep.
That made this possible. When I found out that it was possible in 2014, I couldn't wait.
Mhm.
I was all in. And guess what, everyone? If you let it go, we're going to lose it all. Now's the time to fight.
Another reason, Lynn, why, and I've explained this to Wendy, I have some issues because of my cholesterol. So I have blood loss issues. So that in reality ruled out any kind of surgery for me. And you know what? I just don't care.
It doesn't matter.
No.
You see, I didn't even ask you those questions because to me, it doesn't matter.
Well,
Right.
I want people to understand, especially trans women out there, that it is an option. Okay. You don't have to do it. And there are
Right.
situations like mine where you can't.
Yeah,
And there are no rules as to how you transition.
no.
There's
Right.
none.
There you
No,
go.
I mean, we did a podcast early on when Wendy and I were just doing between the two of us about what does it mean to transition, because people don't understand. They think kids go to school one day and they have surgery and then come home.
Well, that's what they're selling right now.
And that's what people who are ignorant to the facts are buying.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so, helping people understand that. And that's why we're doing what we're doing, educate people.
All of our allies too, not just trans or LGBTQI people, but our allies. We need everybody to get involved because it's not just us. We're just the tip of the iceberg.
Right.
Yeah. Well, thanks for that message. So Pam, we've got your website, progresswithpam.com. You've got a YouTube channel, right?
Yes,
That one?
that is the same. It's Progress with Pam, and that's the YouTube channel for all of the book and politics and so on and so forth. Because the other one is dedicated to Rock Time Warp. And the fun part about that one too is slowly using clips under the fair use doctrine. I'm turning the original shows into something of a video, and it's fun doing that. But I have an extensive, great library, and it's still growing.
Well, tell us a
Um,
little more about that. What's the content in that?
Basically, for 50 weeks, we did original shows where I would interview like Ian Anderson of Jethro Tull, Buck Dharma, aka Don Roser, the lead guitarist and main vocalist for Blue Oyster Cult. From Mountain, the drummer Corky Lang, who also
Okay.
did West Bruce and Lang, Robin Trower, and he's still a good friend. I've actually gotten to know him. He was the guitarist in the original Procol Harum. Remember Whiter
Love
Shade of
Procol
Pale?
Harum.
Oh,
Oh
yes.
gosh.
So we can find that on YouTube, right?
Yes, yes. That's the YouTube channel that is Rock Time Warp. Yeah.
Great.
Um,
So Pam, before we wind up, anything else that you want to share with our audience?
Please get active at any level you can. Get active because it's on all of us. And there was nothing like we have now in terms of communication capabilities. So if we, the people, get active now, which is why I read that preamble to the Constitution at the beginning of this interview, if we, the people, get together, we can put a stop to this over the next, I'm going to say, 8 to 12 years, literally, and
Okay.
do it before it becomes baked
And
in.
Yeah.
potentially reverse everything.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Thanks, Pam. Wendy, anything you want to add before we close out today?
Oh, we're going to get very active over the next year. Very active, both locally and in DC.
Mhm.
We
Cool.
got to get active everywhere, don't we?
And you can count me in to make sure we spread the word on perspectives.
Good.
Great.
And I look to you to be the politician of us, and I'll take care of the radical stuff.
Okay. Hey, I'm with you.
Oh. Well, thank you so much, Pam, for being here today. And thank you to our audience for joining us today. It's been a wonderful conversation. So I'm Lynn Murphy, the cisgender part of this team. Wendy Cole is the transgender part of this team. And we thank you so much for being here today and joining us. We've had such an engaging conversation today with Pam Daniels. And her journey really reminds us of why we've created this podcast in the first place, to demystify the transgender experience. And as Wendy said, to show the humanity, the resilience, and the power behind every story. And Pam's journey shows us that living openly and standing up for justice is not always easy, rarely easy, but it's how history shifts. It's a call to reflect on your own courage and what it takes for you to tell and to live your truth. So we encourage you to keep learning, keep listening, keep opening doors for one another, share out the podcast, like, subscribe, share, comment. We'll look at your comments. Thank you so much for joining us today. And until next time, stay curious and stay kind. Thank you for joining us today on this episode of Demystifying the Transgender Journey. Remember to subscribe so you don't miss a single episode of our fascinating interviews. You can also find more information on our website, thetransgenderjourney.com. So until next time, stay curious and stay kind.